Ryan, Scaggs. Yo, what's up, Scaggs?
Not too much, man. Just a busy time of year. I just saw actually an update pop there too that we've even got marquee games in 5A, 6A getting moved this week. So it's not just me busy; it's the officials are busy too.
Yeah. Anything that affects us in North Idaho?
Lewiston Coeur d'Alene in football just got moved to Thursday night because of a lack of available officials.
Oh, interesting. Okay. Good to know. Obviously, last week there were a lot of football games that got moved due to smoke. That was mostly down in the Treasure Valley and the Magic Valley. And in fact, one game got moved to Labor Day. Waihe and Centennial played on Monday, Labor Day. They had to get a special exemption to do that.
Wow.
So,
I mean, in fact, they got the holiday approval. That's cool. So
yeah. So,
okay.
Okay.
That they had stuff going on that day, I guess. So
Right. Like my job needed to be any more complex. Now I got to worry every week about, did games get moved on the schedule? I just don't have enough time to deal with that. So,
yeah.
Hey,
if you just put out that notice too, by the way, about the Coeur d'Alene Lewiston game. So
if you know of any schedule changes or any cool things you want us to talk about here on the North Idaho Prepcast, you can get in touch with either one of us. You can email me, Brandon at IdahoSports.com. You can hit up Ryan on X at NIdaho Game Night as well. So we will get to all the exciting football action that happened this past week, but I wanted to start in volleyball, Ryan, where, quick shout out to the Coeur d'Alene Vikings. Still undefeated on the season. This week's Keeping Up with the Kill, our weekly volleyball column written by our volleyball expert, Lindsay Togiai Afuk. She kind of spotlights one team around the state each week. This week it was the Coeur d'Alene Vikings. And with Paisley Goings and, just the strong group of seniors, Coeur d'Alene off to a great start. So you can read all about that on our homepage at IdahoSports.com. That's Keeping Up with the Kill. That is our weekly volleyball column from Lindsay Togiai Afuk. I wanted to talk on this space, though, about some smaller schools that are doing impressive things in volleyball. Let's go to the 2A level, and let's start with a team that actually lost. Now, normally, you wouldn't say, this team lost. Let's highlight that. But the fact that it came against the 3-time defending state champions and you took it to 5 sets, pretty darn impressive for the Kamiah Cubs. They are officially 1-1 on the season. They beat Kendrick last night. But in their season opener against Troy, the big bad power that is Troy volleyball, they took it to 5 sets, Ryan, before dropping it 3-2. That last set came down to, it was 15-13. So, Troy was on the ropes, and they dug deep and got the win. So congratulations to Troy. But also, I think Kamiah has been slowly closing the gap the past couple of years, and I can't wait for the rematch.
Yeah, you look at this conference, too. There's some strength within that league. Kendrick now is up at 2A, so that was another league affair as well. So getting the win for the Cubs, that's huge. You look at the district tournament, it's obviously looking well forward, but there's a lot of matches to be played between now and then. But Kamiah to take the defending state champs to the ropes the way they did, there's a lot to build on with that program. And, you look to postseason success, can they pull a shocker and maybe, eke one out later in the year on the rematch, or maybe they get them in the district tournament? And there's some realistic teams in this conference. So you could get a lot of contenders for the state championship out of this one conference.
Yeah, and it has opened up a little bit since Genesee dropped down, right? Genesee had kind of been the second best program. You could pencil them in. I think for what it's worth, Genesee probably wins the 1A White Pine League this year. But in terms of that second slot, we feel pretty good about Troy. Why not Kamiah? I thought Kamiah might take a small step back because they did lose Lainey Landmark to graduation last year, and she was such a high impact player. But with senior Addison Skinner and senior Delaney Usher and junior Emma Krogh, they've got a good nucleus of players that they can build around, certainly. So
yeah, absolutely. And there's a lot that you can say, well, nobody really like, what do you learn in a loss? Well, you can learn a whole lot if you're a program that's trying to rebuild and move towards something, losing a marquee player like a Landmark, but to move forward from that, that's a bright spot there to take Troy to the ropes. And obviously I'm sure there's a little bit of a letdown too, because you see the opportunity to have that win and get a huge, landmark win, quote unquote. But there's a lot more volleyball to be played. And I could see the parity within this conference too, really play out as you start to see the cream rise to the top.
Yeah. And now let's pivot over to the 2A North Star League, where Going into the season, this is kind of how I had it pegged, and this is why I'm sitting here talking about it and not coaching volleyball. Because you had, Lakeside, Genesis Prep, Wallace. For a long time, it had been a 3-team league. Well, Clark Fork, due to the new enrollment number modifications that were made, Clark Fork just barely snuck above that 2A line. So the Wampus Cats, a longtime 1A volleyball power, are now up in the 2A North Star League. And I thought, boy, Clark Fork might come in right away and win this thing. In fact, I was kind of bullish on Clark Fork. So my order in the preseason was kind of like Clark Fork 1, Wallace 2, Genesis Prep 3. Well, what's happened so far, at least in terms of like looking at Wallace's schedule, Genesis Prep beats Wallace in 5 sets, 3-2. The final set came down to 15-11. And then last night, Wallace turns around and sweeps Clark Fork 3-0. I can't make heads or tails of it, I guess.
In the words of Lee Corso, not so fast, my friend, right? Try to prove you wrong there, but that just shows the balance within the league. And I don't know if things got changed and finally the North Star League gets a legit like sole bid to state. They don't have to play a play-in game this year. Hopefully that's the case to where they can earn their ticket outright into the state tournament. But there's some parity within this conference and the balance is there. The competition's there week in and week out that you can see that, one of these teams is going to come in fairly prepared for tournament play as they work through the season. But I mean, it wouldn't surprise me to see these teams continue to split as things progress forward.
Yep, Ryan, I am pleased to announce that District 1 this year gets a full bid all to themselves. Now, I don't know if that is because East Idaho only has the 2 teams this year, Butte County and Grace. They get a half bid, or if it's still just an alternating, hey, one year the North is going to get a half bid, the next year the East is going to get the half bid. But having 4 teams now, you would feel pretty good about, getting a full bid to state.
Yeah. Finally getting that monkey off your back to where you actually get to travel for the state tournament. And well, granted, I think it's up north this year, so you're not traveling very far. But still, the opportunity to play without having to play a pesky play-in game in like McCall or Grangeville or New Plymouth or something like that. So you get an opportunity to just, play your season out, earn your way into the tournament, and find yourself playing in tournament pool play. That's going to be a big deal for these programs. Something that they've, had the pesky. Having to play the 3 seed from the White Pine League or having to play a crossover from one of the East Idaho teams meeting halfway. Hopefully that's, going to be gone forever now, at least for the next few years with this classification cycle. But like I said, this league is way more balanced now with Clark Fork coming up. And I could realistically see these teams with a season split between them. Lakeside's going to throw their hat in the mix too.
Yeah. Lakeside working with a new coach, first-year coach, and exciting things down there at Lakeside for sure. Okay, let's pivot to football now. And I mean, there's a lot of places we could start. I think we have to start with what was the most exciting game in the entire state of Idaho last week, and that was the non-conference battle up in Spirit Lake between Grangeville and Timberlake. These 2 teams aren't even in the same classifications. Grangeville is a 3A, Timberlake is a 4A. Timberlake has a 2-point lead with 1:30 to go, and they are driving. They are at the 1-yard line of Grangeville, looking to pretty much put the game on ice. They fumble. Grangeville recovers. Now they've got to go 99 yards, essentially. I think it was 97 officially. Grangeville recovered at the 3. They have to go basically the length of the field in 1:30. And they do it. David Goikoa to Thane Williams, the game-winning touchdown pass, and Grangeville stuns Timberlake 38-36. What an incredible game.
Yeah, it was unbelievable. Mark Nelke has a video posted on X. If nobody's seen it, he's reposted the final play of that ball game, and holy cow, was that exciting. As time's running out, and Goikoa scrambles to his right, scrambles back to his left, finds the receiver cross field in the back of the end zone. He finds Williams under the goalpost for the go-ahead winning score, the walk-off. Just an unbelievable ending to a phenomenal high school football game. And, Grangeville gets the big victory, going up a classification and on the road, getting a marquee win for them. That's going to be a huge shot in the arm for that program. And, Grangeville could do some big things this year with that group, that senior heavy leadership, the upperclassmen in that group. There's a lot of talent in that lineup, and that Grangeville Bulldog team is, looking in pretty good shape moving forward as they start to approach league play.
Yeah, and I think the biggest thing is they've got good linemen up front. It's excellent line play for Grangeville this year. So let's see if I can do this here, Ryan. So Mark Nelke retweeted David Goykoa, Grangeville's quarterback.
There we go.
He got the clip. And so let me see. I'm going to pop this on. I'll make it full size screen here, and we're not going to get audio, but you and I can kind of commentate through it. So there's
9 seconds, I believe, or 3 seconds.
Yeah, 3 seconds left. They're down still, by 2.
I think the balls are just shy of the 10-yard line, if I'm not mistaken. No, ball's on the 20.
So Goykoa, look at that. He's looking left, scrambles back
up front. That protection is unbelievable.
Scrambles back and then throws it. And his guy, the play had broken down at that point. It was essentially find a spot in the end zone, get open. Thane Williams does that. Timberlake, unfortunately, it's
a heartbreaker.
Yeah.
You talk about a heady play from your quarterback to scramble one direction, take the defense all the way, to that play side, and then roll back to the backside of that defense and find, the receiver smartly just found space and sat there. And his quarterback found him and delivered an absolute dart right in the chest for the touchdown. That was a phenomenal play. And, both teams played their tails off in that ball game. I mean, obviously getting a turnover at the 3-yard line, you would feel fairly secure that your defense is at least going to give you the chance to clinch. And Grangeville goes the distance, 97 yards, and ends up getting the ultimate score. But what a phenomenal ball game.
Yeah, Grangeville, I'm really curious to see how they do this year, especially because the 2A playoffs undergo a small tweak where in years past there were 5 districts and the top 4 district champions received a first round bye, and then whoever was the lowest ranked 5th conference winner had to play in the first round. The team from the north has kind of been pigeonholed into that slot the last couple of years with Grangeville and Kellogg and etc. And then they've always been reseeded as a lower seed, and they've had to hit the road. This year, there's only 4 districts because Declo and Wendell from District 4, they used to have their own league, and Declo was good enough that in a 2-team league, they were usually the 1 or 2 seed. They have now joined District 5. So you have 4 clear districts, 4 clear district winners. They're going to get buys into the quarterfinals, which means Grangeville, if they win the league, will get to host a quarterfinal game. And they haven't been able to say that for a while. And that could be huge. That could get them over the hurdle maybe to finally get to the semis.
Yeah, and that's a team that, there's not too far, in the rearview mirror of a state championship, appearance for that Bulldogs group. I mean, obviously none of these kids, I think, have played in a state championship game, but that school's won some in the 2000s. There's the pedigree within that group, and those kids, when they were at the youth tackle level, saw, a lot of success with the high school program there. And to get there now where they're at, I think that they're going to find some favorability in the rankings too. I mean, playing up a classification, but they scheduled pretty well this year. They've got, some quality opponents on their radar. And I think their conference, while people see the CILs a little bit down this year, if you outside of Grangeville, I think the Bulldogs are just going to flat take care of business this season. I mean, I really do look at this group, and Goykoa, in my opinion, one of the underrated quarterbacks in this group. I mean, you really look at him, especially in the 3A classification, not a lot of notoriety statewide. I mean, he doesn't get necessarily the hype, and he gets overlooked by some of the other quarterbacks in North Idaho. I mean, there's a lot of, Velasco and Lehman and Simmons and some other guys that get a lot of notoriety, but he's steadily just been a very, very solid player. And he's going to have himself a heck of a senior season. He's already off to a great start.
Yep. The rest of the 2A CIL last week, Orofino beat the Moscow JVs 34-0. I think that actually presents significant progress for the Maniacs.
That's the first win in a long time too, so that's a good deal for them.
Yeah, for sure. And then St. Mary's hosted Sandpoint and fell 54-14. Certainly no shame in falling there. In terms of the 4A IML, Bonners Ferry's 0-2. They fell to Eureka, Lincoln County, Montana last week. I think 39-6. And then Moscow 2-0. They beat Caldwell 54-0. No disrespect to Caldwell. That's not a measuring stick win for Moscow.
They got a test this week. I mean, they're playing Clarkston. That's going to be a heck of a ball game for them. They got their hands full with the Bantams coming.
Yes, I'm still not convinced. Moscow, I guess I'm tentatively saying Moscow is the favorite, but this thing is wide open, I think, still.
Well, you look at Moscow's schedule now. I mean, coming up, they had their, I don't want to say layups to start the season, but
it was.
Yeah, the confidence builders, I guess, is what you could call them. It's like an SEC school, canceling or scheduling a couple cupcakes to start before you run into your league play in the meat of your schedule. But, they've got Clarkston, Pullman, and then they're going to play, the complement of North Idaho schools at the 5A and 4A ranks. Like, they got their hands full. I mean, Moscow's got their schedule coming up. There is no easy games now, until I don't want to say Bonners Ferry is even easy for them, because I think Bonners Ferry can play if they play discipline, they're going to give Moscow fits. But the Bear team has talent. That's the thing. You look at it like on paper, there's talent on that group. So can Moscow win some of the games that maybe people are counting them out? That's going to be, they're in the rankings this week. I saw in the media poll. Is it deserved? I mean, they've done what they needed to do in the 2 games they've scheduled so far. And you compare them statewide to the other 4A schools that are out there, and, with offensive performance and defensive performances, they're doing really, really well. So, it's still a question mark because I still haven't seen them play a team that's their size yet. So that will be, other than Caldwell, but Caldwell, we know what they are down south, and that's just the Cougars do what they can with who they have. But that's just not a historically strong program. So it'll be interesting to see what the Bears can do.
Yeah, for context, for those from North Idaho that may not know, Caldwell has operated as an independent team the last 3 seasons, basically saying we're not in a spot where we can compete in our league, the Southern Idaho Conference, and they are already pushing that 6A boundary in terms of enrollment. So it's not like they could go petition down like Moscow could. They're kind of stuck in this spot. So they've played an independent schedule the past couple of years. It's just been a mishmash of opponents. So
yeah, they're not the wrestling or soccer programs.
Yes.
The Bears do not, they're not Bears, but the Cougars, the Caldwell teams do not compare to some of their other sports within the school.
For sure. All right, let's pivot to 6A and 5A football before we wrap up with a little cross-country talk. Here's our good friend Max Oswald in the chat from the Bonner County Daily Bee. He wants to know, and this is not a North Idaho question, but any insight into the Bishop Kelly Bonneville game? All things considered, I was surprised to see Bonneville only lost by 8, 28-20. And I'm sure that's a result a lot of people saw statewide and went, Bishop Kelly, defending state champs, only won by 8 against a Bonneville team that, let's be honest, is on their 3rd coach in 3 years and has built a little bit of positive momentum, but really still a program that's finding its footing, because this will tie back to Sandpoint's gotten off to a really strong start and looks like, I believe, a Final Four team in 5A football this year. Yep. But so real quick, Bishop Kelly, they were supposed to host Bonneville last Friday, but because of all the smoke that came through the Treasure Valley, and it came from the Magic Valley, and the wind pushed it all the way over to Boise, that game was either going to be A, canceled, or B, had to be moved somewhere else. Well, all the big bad 6A schools scooped up all of the available venues in the Treasure Valley, so Bishop Kelly was kind of SOL there. They came to an agreement with Bonneville on Friday that Bishop Kelly, instead of hosting, would travel to Idaho Falls to play Bonneville. So kind of like a scramble drill where you were expecting a home game. You have a certain routine when it's a home game. You have a certain schedule to all of a sudden, hey guys, we got to hurry up and get on the bus and drive, 4 hours to Idaho Falls to play this game. So in terms of preparation, that kind of went out the window a little bit. It was kind of just a, hey, let's line up and play and see what happens. Bishop Kelly mentally probably wasn't in the best spot for this game, but also they have a history of doing this over the past couple of years, playing these really close competitive games to the point where I kept saying all year during the playoffs last year, this can't keep continuing for Bishop Kelly. They can't keep dancing on this knife's edge like they have. It's going to bite them at some point, and they did win the championship. But I think that's the biggest thing. I wouldn't read too much into it because it was such an unusual circumstance where Bishop Kelly, like on Friday, just all of a sudden dropped what they were doing, got on the bus, and drove to Idaho Falls to play that game. So anyways,
I would say this too, and this is, I'll just throw in my 2 cents. What if Bonneville's better than people think? They got a new coach. They've got some guys that can play. I saw them play with my own eyes. There were some players on that team. I mean, they were decimated by injury last year. They had some big injuries. I've seen with my own eyes when a new coach comes in, how they can change the trajectory of a program pretty quickly and get the kids to buy in and believe. And I realistically see some of that changing within that program. I think Bonneville is going to sneak a couple wins this year in their conference. I'm not saying they're going to go in and knock off Skyline or anything like that, but I think that they're going to make things competitive with some schools because they do have some kids that can play. But I think bigger than anything, they believe in their coach. And I realistically see that win too. I'm going to give Bonneville some credit to go toe-to-toe with PK and play that tough game, because I think Bonneville, if they continue to have this success or start to believe, they're going to get some of those kids that are hiding in the school that aren't playing right now. They're going to come out. And I see some of those kids that have been leaving to go to other schools within, neighboring districts. They're going to come out too, and they're going to stay within the program. Bonneville, you could see kind of as a sleeping giant in that area. If they're able to get the right coach and keep the right coach, there's going to be an opportunity for success.
Yeah, their coach is Shane Stevenson. He has been a high school coach in Arizona, which, it's a different level of football down there. Was an assistant coach at Carroll College up in Helena, Montana, NAIA powerhouse. So he's coached in college. I agree with you. I think it's a little bit of both. I think it's the unusual circumstances. Yep. I do think Bonneville is better than people would initially give them credit for. They have two great running backs, Canyon Todd, Keaton Train.
That's Canyon a hard offense to prepare for if you're only given, a few days, and then you have to make a quick adjustment and, get on a bus and stuff like that. Like that. Todd's a legit running back. He's a legit running back.
Yep. And they have a big tight end too, Tivon Sakaguchi, who's like a 6'6" monster out
He was
there.
a matchup nightmare last year in the playoffs, like in that first game. I mean, granted, they got routed, but he created some issues, with Sandpoint.
For sure. Here's Sean Kane, our East Idaho Prepcast host, in the chat. Bold. Now, I think he's talking. I think he's talking about what I said, not what you said. Not that, but I think he agrees that Bonneville is better. But when I said Sandpoint's a Final Four team, and hey, as you're going to watch, by the way, we have a new show that we're doing this fall. It's called Gem State Game Day. It airs every Thursday morning at 7 a.m. Pacific time, right here on the IdahoSports.com YouTube channel, Facebook page, or X account. You can, of course, watch it at any point, Thursday or Friday. It basically is a table setter, a big preview of all the games happening statewide. On this week's edition of Gem State Game Day, last week we did our IdahoSports.com Pick 6, where we pick 6 games, one from each classification, and all of us prepcasters pick who we think is going to win. Ryan, we all picked Weiser to defeat Buell last week. Buell came out and won 9-6, and so I did an interview with their head coach, Josh Creasy, and 4 members of that Buell Indians football team. And I said, all right, guys, we'll go just down the firing line here, one by one. You let me have it. And it was great. So if you want to tune into that, you can tomorrow. Again, 7 a.m. Thursday morning here on IdahoSports.com.
I had a rough week last week.
No doubt. While we're on the subject of bold predictions, though, I'll throw it out there. If you're asking me today, a Final Four in 5A football, I'd say Skyline, and in no particular order. I'd say Skyline, I'd say Sandpoint, I'd say Bishop Kelly, I'd say Twin Falls. That's just my kind of looking at it and assessing.
I'm not sleeping on the Lakeland Hawks right now. I'm telling you right now, I'm not sleeping on the Hawks at all.
So let's talk about that. Let's break it down. Lakeland is 2-0 as well. A win over Bonners Ferry, and then a win over Lake City last Friday, 17-7. They are going to host Weiser, who just lost to Buell, as I said, 9-6 in a non-conference matchup Friday night. Ryan, you and I will be there on the call for North Idaho Game Night on IdahoSports.com. This is going to be an interesting one. You've got Weiser. They're coached by Tom Harrison, Idaho's all-time winningest coach. They are very motivated after losing the game 9-6. They hadn't lost to Buell in more than 20 years, and they lose. And meanwhile, you've got a Lakeland team that is trying to prove that, hey, we are better than we were a year ago, too. Staying healthy is going to be key for Lakeland, but they've got really good offensive and defensive linemen. They've got Lovey Wheel back at running back. This is a good team, right?
Yeah, and there's other cast of characters on the outside too that they've got weapons they can use in space and a quarterback that can deliver the ball when he needs to. I mean, you want to talk about two teams that love to run the football. Both these teams do, and I mean, this is a game you could be a 45-minute first half. You're looking at a game kicks off at 7. You're like, oh, I'll show up a little bit late. It doesn't matter. I'm just going to miss the opening kickoff. You could be midway through the second quarter in half hour. So with these teams that love to run the football, but there's players aplenty in this ball game. It's going to be, I think, a really interesting game because it's two styles that I think play off of each other. So it's going to be leaning heavily on the defense to get stops in this game. Both teams will, because I think team speed is going to be the big key. And Lakeland, with that offensive line, though, they've got some maulers up front, and that we'll talk about it a lot during the game because they'll jump off on film. When you start seeing them in person and video. Like that offensive line, they've got some road graders up front. And, this Lakeland team could that group up front, the anchors on the O-line, and that we're going to see this with a lot of teams in North Idaho this year is the offensive line. Sandpoint's another team that leans heavily on their O-line. That's going to set the tone for their game. And, if they can keep their quarterbacks clean, they can keep creating holes for the running backs. That's going to bode well for keeping you in a lot of ball games by keeping your defense off the field.
Yep. Okay, let's wrap up with this because we're running short on time here. We could talk about Coeur d'Alene. We could talk about Lakeside and Wallace football. We'll have plenty of time to talk about those guys later on in the season, I feel like. Let's wrap up with cross country. Timberlake is getting ready to host its annual Timberlake Invite. It's going to be this Saturday at Farragut State Park in Athol, which is a beautiful place to visit. Again, I'm not big on running in general. I imagine it's a fun place to go run in.
Well, they got a shooting range. They've got like frisbee golf. They got all sorts of things to do out there too. You don't have to just go for runs.
Yes. Idaho schools that will be there: Bonners Ferry, Clark Fork, Coeur d'Alene Charter, Kellogg, Kootenai, Lake City, Lake Lund, Lewiston, Logos is coming over. Moscow's going to be there. Post Falls, Priest River, Sandpoint, Timberlake, Troy. Those are all the North Idaho schools. We do have some Southern Idaho schools coming up. Bishop Kelly, Bora, Capital will be there. We're going to have Meridian coming up to run. Meridian's got probably the favorite to win the 6A boys individual title this year in Nate Stadlantner. So that's going to be a fun guy to watch for sure. And then we have some Washington schools coming over like Colville and Deer Park and Liberty out there in Spangle, and Gonzaga Prep's coming over to run in this thing. And then we've got some, Montana schools coming over too. Florence, Carleton, the Florence Falcons. That's not too far from where I grew up, actually. So it's going to be, I think, a lot of fun. It's going to be a really good competition.
Yeah, and they got a great course out there too. Plus, the weather is going to be phenomenal. And it's just a great experience out there. I mean, Farragut, if folks haven't had a chance to go visit the state park there, just a really, really beautiful setting too. So it's a cool opportunity for those kids to get a chance to run a great course, but also the talent level's taking a massive jump too. So there's going to be some really good times on that course as well. So it'd be great to see some of the smaller schools that we know that are powers run against some of these well-known teams coming in. So it'll be a really good opportunity for those kids this weekend.
For sure. 41 or 42 teams are going to be there, just on a quick count. JV races are at 9 Saturday morning. Varsity races, the girls will be at 10:10. Boys will be at 10:40. So that'll be a lot of fun this week in the Timberlake Invite. Here is Max Oswald with a quick note, and then we will get out of here. Paul Kent of Sandpoint, currently number 1 in 5A by about 36 seconds. Nice flat course at Farragut. Yeah, not a lot of hills. So that's going to be obviously conducive to running a good time. He says he ran 15:50 in Libby last week, Libby, Montana, 5th fastest in Sandpoint history. All right.
Do we just need to get Max? Like, he chimes in so much. Bring him on the show.
We should do an off in between seasons or off season show with Max for sure. He is crushing it.
He's like our version of the bear, right? It just comes in and gives us all the underlying stat information.
For sure. I mean, I've said it before. I'll say it again. Between what Max is doing at the Bonner County Daily Bee and Mark Nelke and Jason Elliott at the Coeur d'Alene Press and the great crew over at the Lewiston Tribune, and then even the weekly papers, over in the Silver Valley and St. Mary's and Orofino's got one. We're pretty spoiled with our newspaper coverage up here in North Idaho. So keep up the good work, everybody.
And give a shout out to our friend Trebe, who works for the Listen Tribune. He's been dealing with some health stuff, so we just want to hope he's doing well and recovering well. I know he had a seizure last week, and so he's we just want to give him our best as well, because he's a big friend of our show and he listens fairly regularly, even though his job title has changed to the news side instead of the sports side with the Trib. He still checks in fairly regularly with us, and just a great dude.
Yeah, definitely. We're thinking about you, and hopefully you're on that road to recovery. All right, we are on the road to all sorts of great competition here. Enjoy it this weekend. Travel safely, and we will see you back here next week for another edition of the North Idaho Prepcast. For Ryan Scaggs, I'm Brandon Baney. Thanks for tuning in on IdahoSports.com.